Good morning. Welcome to everyone to our March 19th, 2026. This is our bi-monthly morning discussion session, and we have three presentations today. First is from Smart Start in Forsyth County. We're going to talk about the pre-K initiative update, and we're going to have a MDWBE update from our attorney, Gordon Watkins. And we're going to have an emergency service assessment update from Kyle Haney. And we will begin with Smart Start at Forsyth County. And Dr. Finney, if you want to start us off, and whatever that's good. And we have received your PowerPoint, and we can go over, and we'll be good. And all this.
Wait for the presentation to come up. I appreciate it. You want me to control it? Or?
Yeah, you can do just clicking, just arrows thing.
All right, I think we're ready. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Martin, Chantel Robinson, County Administrator. My name is Dr. Louis A. Finney, Jr., President and CEO of Smart Start of Forsyth County. I'll also be presenting with my colleagues as well. You probably know Leslie, Director of Pre-K Initiative Organization, but also our Chief Impact Officer, Glenise, will do a presentation today just regarding the great investment that the county did, but also want to thank you all personally because the county did something that was strategic, thinking about our children and our families, and I want to give a thankful to you all on behalf of the 20,000 children and families that we serve every single day. So good job to you. Okay, just want to start by beginning and explaining who we are. And some of y'all may know we've been around this community since 1994. And we see ourselves as a convener for early care and education for all kids in all systems from 0 to 5. And each year we serve through multiple programs about 20,000 children and families in every single zip code, throughout every corner in the rural communities, but also in the urban areas as well. And we're proud of that work that we do. And another responsibility that we have is ensuring that we have quality in our particular community. And that's rated through our 4 to 5 rated pre-K program. And I'm going to pass this torch over to my colleague who's going to really explain this community collaboration. And that's collaboration between Smart Start and multiple organizations to fulfill the wishes of the county through the ARPA project, but also ensure these children and families are ready to learn.
Good morning, I'm Leslie Mullenix. I'm here before you representing pre-K priority today. As you can see on the screen, we've been around since 2017. Actually, we began in 2014 with some conversations locally with family services starting to convene how we could do more high quality here in the county. In 2017, we really got a big boost from the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust supporting the work that we were doing. It was a collaborative of probably 30, now grown to 80 coalition members. That includes folks like Smart Start. We also have the school system, families, and philanthropy involved. We were very fortunate during the pandemic. It turned out that a crisis created this wonderful opportunity for us to do a task force that Chairman Martin had helped really push and support along with Superintendent McManus to look at what we could do as a group in the county, looking at what the research had shown us up till then about early childhood and how we maybe could move this forward. So for 2 years, I was grateful that they took that time during, for the 1 year of the task force to do a final report of 19 recommendations that really kind of set the pace for where we could go next. Again, fortunately for us, with the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan dollars, there was a plan how we could collaboratively come together. Based on the task force recommendations, we were able to take about 8 of those and then propose to you all a way to pilot a cohort for 2 years to show how these recommendations could produce sustainable outcomes for children. And why was that important? Well, the challenge, as we know, across not only Forsyth County, across the state and the nation, that we don't have enough high-quality pre-K for kids. A licensed program is very expensive. We do have some publicly funded slots, but there's not enough to go around for all those that are eligible. And right now in Forsyth County, we only have about 45% of our 4-year-olds in a licensed program. So that leaves a majority of kids doing something else during the day. And we also know that kindergarten goes much smoother for kids if they have high-quality pre-K. Also, we do want to make sure we link that to what happens to our third graders in the school system. Right now, only 44% of those children are reading at grade level. If you have high-quality pre-K, the research shows you do much better, not only in third grade, but the life course, not only in your schooling, but throughout life if you have high-quality pre-K. So the other key thing we want to point out is about 33% of our Black children and 29% of our Hispanic Latino children are reading at grade level. And that is the largest demographic of our student population. So we really needed to lean into how to do a better job of supporting those children. So our solution was this cohort that Glenise is going to talk to you about. And I just want to also lift up that task force recommendation report. You have that. You may not have it in front of you, but Dr. Martin was instrumental in helping get that put together. And again, like I said, about 7 of those recommendations of the 19 were implemented in the cohort that you'll hear about. And that was only able to be done because of your support with the ARPA dollars. The other thing, the support that I'll say, and Dr. Finney alluded to, is all the folks on the screen there were instrumental in bringing this to fruition. And we made sure that we had an evaluation group that was an unbiased group outside of Forsyth County that looked at the data, the analysis, and the outcomes. So with that, I do want to thank you again. This wouldn't have been possible without the support of the county and also so many of our members that are here representing today that have been a part of the pre-K priority. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. So for the next couple of slides, I will talk about the impact of our 2-year project from year 1 and the results in year 2. So just to start, just want to talk a little bit about our administration of the grant. We were very successful in deploying the $3.7 million, had no findings, worked very closely with our counterparts here at the county. And I'll shout out Mr. Arnold, who I worked with very closely to ensure that if we had any programmatic questions, any financial questions, they were available to us, and that was with Ms. Kim Price, were available to support us. And for that reason, no findings. We were successful in deploying 100% of the funds and serving 710 children, to which our goal was 540. So to talk a little bit about where these children were, so because we served all of Forsyth County, we were able to impact of 10 zip codes. So we were able to set up classroom supports across all of Forsyth County, serving across the arena. So we served Head Starts, NC Pre-K, private, as well as classrooms in Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. And there you'll see on the screen that we served 3, we're consistent in year 2 for Head Start. NC Pre-K, same, private, we were able to serve 2 more additional classrooms than before, given the need that was needed over in our private setting, which was excellent. And then in our Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools, we served 7, both in year 1 and 2. And over to the far right, you'll see where we still have a number of classrooms yet to impact. So this 3.7 was invested across 4 primary strategic priorities. You'll see the first is our teacher quality and retention, where we serve 76 teachers. And within that bucket, that was the dollars and services and supports that came through coaching, salary equity bonuses, retention bonus, as well as tuition supports to support our staff, our educators who are looking to continue on with their education or begin their journey. Student support and assessment. As stated, we served 710 students of the 540 goal. And to serve those students, we had a number of coaches who provided day-to-day training and technical assistance, deployed assessment tools that measured and analyzed the environment, the classroom quality, and between the teachers and the students, as well as our curriculum and teaching and instruction. And based upon those results, we were able to supply materials and equipment to the classroom to increase their quality. The next bucket is family engagement and supports. Over the course of the 2 years, we were able to successfully impact over 100 families and supporting them with the engagement activities, as well as supporting them in reaching goals of their own. And that work we did with family services, where they've had family advocates who worked one-to-one with each of our families, and over the course of the year one as well as year two, set up goals using the needs assessment to determine what needs the family had, and then supported them with services that either we provided as a collaboration or even providing services outside with other local programs to support their families, as well as community outreach activities. System infrastructure is our final bucket. Within that bucket, we had our data and program evaluation. And Leslie just alluded to that a little bit. We had a comprehensive system of collecting data to ensure that it was accurate and timely. And with support of our outside evaluation partner, we were able to pull that data together so that we could efficiently provide a report in year one and then again in year two. At the bottom, you'll see our clients. We see our teachers that were served, as well as students that were served and our families served. And approximately, when you pull all these strategic priorities together, a roundabout amount of how much of these resources were dedicated to each.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
In your 22,389, is that sort of an average of teachers and teacher assistants?
Yes.
Because they're not listed separately, so it kind of.
Correct.
The teachers were making more, the teacher assistants probably a little less, and you combine, that was your average for all people involved.
Correct.
So the 76 teachers includes both classroom and teacher assistants?
Yeah, there were about, yes, it is a combination of teachers and teacher assistants, to answer your question,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Over the 2-year project.
And if I may ask, I'm excited to see that you exceeded the goal of 550 students. What was the secret sauce in terms of exceeding that goal?
The secret sauce was really our collaboration with the county. Because as we opened up in year one, we had a specific, of course, everything was on paper, and then you roll it out, and then you say, oh my goodness, there's a lot more need and support that was needed across through our classrooms. So it was in working with Bailey, who approved our strategy of opening up additional supports for classrooms and classrooms that were having some struggles and needed additional supports, as long as they stayed within the budget. Okay. So because we were able to maximize the budget and stay within it, we were able to support more children.
That's good.
So really our secret sauce was support.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, going a little deeper into when we think about the impact across these dimensions, and this is just a few. So as I stated, we served 710 students, children, and you will see a little bit later that we were excited to see that we were able to exceed NC pre-K readiness averages in 4 out of the 6. And later on, you'll see that those 2 where we did not exceed, we were very, very close. So we were very excited to see these improvements over time, which is another. So in year 2, we saw far stronger gains than in year 1. Recognizing that year 1 typically is a startup year. So there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of coordinating, but even in year 1, we saw those gains. But in year 2, and I will say that it was through the success of the supports that were provided to our teachers in their instruction, and supporting their practice of the skills where we saw that year 2 gain. And we'll show that a little bit later in another slide. And then lastly, we had 48 health referrals identified. And those health referrals included vision or physical as well as developmental, which was one thing that wasn't necessarily a part of our project, but it was something that we noted as we were moving along throughout year 1 and year 2. And it was a request not only of our teachers, but of parents as well as administrators to gain more information about how to identify children who may need additional support or may have developmental delays. So we were able to support those children and make those referrals as well. And that was in collaboration with the school district. So the Center for, it was their Exceptional Children's Department. And then going on to our teachers, what we were excited to see, and I think we shared this last time, that we had 80% of our teachers were retained in year 1. In year 2, that went up to 83%, which we're excited to see. Now, actually, in year 2, we actually had 100% of our teachers retained. So this is collectively 83% over year 1 and 2 together is what we have. So we were very excited to see that. And that, of course, is versus 62% statewide. So you can see that this is it was a very effective project. And of course, you know, incentives do matter. Dollars do work. But I think the biggest thing that was our teachers walked away feeling very encouraged. They felt like educators. They felt equipped to do the work to ensure our children were moving forward to kindergarten, fully aware of all of what they needed to move forward. So it was a really huge project.
Can I interrupt you for another second? I just want to make sure I am right about this. Basically, the salary part was to try to equalize salaries to the school district. I mean, that was the goal. So the 7 teachers in the school district didn't get money of this because they were getting paid by the school district part on their salary schedule. If you all can imagine between, you know, you have private providers, you got Head Start providers, you got NC Pre-K providers, and a lot of different folks, the salaries were very different. So what happens before this, if a teacher left the school district, you had a bunch of people wanting to get that job because it paid a lot more money. So you ended up with this you might have 2 or 3 classrooms impacted by a single vacancy. So the idea was to try to equalize the salaries in these experimental classrooms in the non-school district teachers, so that it would reduce that constant moving. And that's a pretty big, I mean, that's a really great indicator. And I didn't realize in year 2 it was actually 100%, that people all stayed put. And you all know that continuity, when you change teachers and you're changing people,
Yes.
that your ability to work with families, kids, and whatever gets diminished. That turnover is a cost.
Absolutely.
It's a cost in performance, and it's a cost literally. So I think that finding is a really good one, to see that kind of difference that it made. But it is an expensive issue to get into, particularly if you try to scale that out. But if you're really wanting success, that just shows that made a huge difference in keeping people in the classrooms.
Significant.
Sorry, I did a little editorial comment there.
Thank you. And we'll talk, we'll go a little deeper into that a little bit later, but you're absolutely right. Where were we there? Okay, we were talking about our coaching. So we were able to provide 859 hours of coaching, which would really equate it to some individualized TNTA for each of our classrooms on a weekly basis. And through that relationship, we really saw many of our educators to be able to really apply what they were learning. They were able to ask questions. There was some modeling. It was really comprehensive, and it really supported that relationship, but also it really helped to develop those teachers as we went through the model over the course of the model. And in response to the coaching, many times from the assessments that were done in the classroom, or even teachers who may have decided that they wanted some professional growth in a specific subject of their own, we were able to provide over 1,000 hours of professional development over the course of year 1 and year 2. And as to Dr. Martin's point, that's a significant cost that many of our private provider settings do not have. So it was a huge benefit to our private provider settings. And 96% of our teachers reported that they felt that their kindergartens were prepped ready, and they were confident in the way that of their instruction, which was huge because that was an improvement from year one, where there was a lot of, for those that were able to stay in many of them who were in the cohort from year one to year two, you saw that growth from year one, and you saw that confidence grow with many of them. So it was just exciting to hear that they saw it too and felt it. Lastly, in our families, we had 114 families to participate, which was optional. And we did see a large amount of those families come from our Head Start Center, where that philosophy is built into their structure. But we were excited to see that we had several families in year two outside of the Head Start program in our private provider setting to attend a lot of our family engagement activities, to participate in the family goal setting, and to take advantage of the resources and supports that were provided through the project. 96% of our families stated that they were very satisfied with the experience that both their children had as well as what they had. And one other thing that I was really excited, which is unexpected, but really exciting to see. When we went into the project, we were looking to serve our families who were predominantly Spanish speaking. However, as we began to peel back that onion, we learned that there were a number of languages that were just in our little project alone, recognizing that the school system serves probably 100 of different languages. And just in our little project, we learned that there were a number of languages that we weren't quite yet prepared for. However, our partner within the Hispanic League made sure that we had translation services, not only for our Spanish-speaking families, but also for our families who spoke Mandarin, Bengali, Arabic, and Polish. I'm sorry. Okay, so talking this next slide speaks a little bit about the equity investment that we employed that we're looking to close the gap. And then from this project, it really was a first step in creating a tool as well as creating an action plan for each of our centers. So to ensure that as they are moving children in and out of their programs, that they are looking at all of their services, the curriculum, and their approach to learning through an equity lens. So a couple of things that came up as we moved through the project, and this is just a few things, because it's a very comprehensive tool that was created that has an action plan associated. But a couple of things that were noted that was high on our scale was that our Hispanic families were 21 points behind our white children in literacy. We had private classrooms lacking culturally responsive materials at 45%. Now, we recognize that we know that materials are expensive, but also the recognition of how to identify an equitable classroom, that was also a part too. And that came through our professional development. And then instructional support and quality that looks at how teachers enhance or support or extend cognitive learning and experiences in the classroom with our children. And that can show up through extending questions, having open-ended questions, supporting children with problem solving, and things of that nature is what shows up there. And speaking in, and then came in very low. Lower than expected, well, lower in comparison to the 7-point scale. So it was lower on the 7-point scale, below threshold. Those are things that we identified early. But one thing that I do want to note about instructional supports is that that's something that typically scores lower across nationwide. Nationwide, that's a lower score. Because that, of course, would require our teachers to really have a really clear grasp of how to instruct children. It required lots of support, a lot of training and development, how to initiate open-ended questions, and to go deeper with children and scaffold them as they're learning. That's a skill that takes a lot of time. I will say that our Head Start programs have a pretty good grasp on it. They have some very strong scores as they have been implementing class for a number of years. But in our project, we learned that that is a lower score, and that's something that we need to continue to pour some instruction and support and development in. So what did we do? So we provided 14 professional development courses that were specific to culturally responsive teaching to help to raise those scores, and we did see that gap closed. We made sure that our classrooms had diverse materials and equipment. And when we say diverse, we had a number of, we purchased books that were in children's home language. We ensured there were materials and equipment that looked like them in each of the classroom settings and over in the classroom areas, be it the block area, the toy area, dolls, children, disabled equipment and materials for children, making sure that it was highly diverse. And then, as I stated earlier, 95 different translation services for all of our children that were in the project to make sure that they were able to be, the instruction or to services were delivered in their language or to scaffold them across.
Can I interrupt you again? Do you know, for example, in your year 2 measurable progress, just in those 3 things, the first one, your literacy gap reduced. It was 21 back in year 1. Do you remember what it was besides being reduced? If it went from 21 to 20, that's not very impressive. If it went from 21 to 15, I'm just kind of curious what kind of gap you noticed after the end of year 2.
No, I do not have that exact detail, but I can look. I can make sure I can get back with you. But you are absolutely right. But I guess I would say, I want to, you're not just making sure that, I want to say it was like 1% to 2%. 2%. So it was a small percent, but the gap was closed. And I think when you talk about a 2-year project, it really does take more time to see the results. So I think as we were able to identify those children in year 1, make sure that they had the resources in the classrooms in year 2, recognizing the children in year 1 transitioned to kindergarten. So I think what we saw in year 2 was probably year 2 children benefiting more from the resources after it was identified. So it just,
I
it
realize
just
there's
takes
two
time.
different groups of kids, and so they
Yes.
don't cascade.
Absolutely.
The last part, I'm not even sure what this scale is, the 7 scale that was a 2.7. So after your translation services and other things, did that also get better? Whatever that scale was, did that improve in year 2?
Well, actually, it was actually lower. It was lower, and it did increase. However, when on that 7-point scale, it still is significantly lower. And as I stated, that's something that it will continue to be something that I think all programs will have to work towards and make some really concerted effort to put resources in specifically around those pieces of professional development. But that's not something that we only struggle with here in Forsyth County. It really is a national piece of the instruction that we needs that attention.
Okay.
If I may, those of us who are not immersed in the details of the program need a little more information about the context. 21 points out of what possible score? What are the comparative scores of the groups that you were looking at? How is that from a single test? Is it from a series of tests? How is it measured? And the same with the instructional support quality. It would be helpful to have more background on that.
Sure. So instructional support is a dimension that comes out of our class, and that is an assessment that's performed twice in the school, in the classroom. But there's several sessions to series of sessions, but at least 2. So
Yeah, can you just give the acronym, because most of them aren't familiar with class. They're probably
Thank
thinking
you.
you're talking about class.
No,
Class is an
it's
actually evidence-based tool, but you
Yep.
can explain that.
it's a classroom assessment scoring system. So in this particular tool, it is to assess the climate of the classroom and the relationship between the student and the teacher to support that instruction and to make sure that the children are learning and growing at their specific pace, because all children develop at different pace levels. This particular one, it would start with a 1 and it'll go on to 7. As I stated, we were at the year 2, we are at about a 2.7. Now, nationally, roughly folks were scoring at 2.9. So there's still nationally, it's about 2.9. And within that score is probably a 2.11 to 3.8 being on the higher end, not seeing too many, if any, making it to a 7. But even when you think of the threshold, 2.7 is lower.
Well,
Does that help?
It does.
Kinda.
Do you have anything in writing that would give that context a little more
We
completely?
do,
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
yes.
I have a question about access. I'm trying to take your numbers and do the math. Looks like you may have around 20 in a classroom or something like that. But
Well, the range, it really did vary. In our private provider settings, we had a lower, I'm sorry, well, I'll let you ask your question first, and then I'll respond.
Okay, yeah, but you nailed where I was headed. I know there are waiting lists for private facilities all over this county. Some are, you have to give them your firstborn in order to get somebody in there. But I'm only aware of one new preschool in this county opening up this year. You may have more information about that. I hope you know more, but it appears to me, that access is still a significant issue in this county.
It is, and yes, it continues to be. It has and it continues to be. And I think what we saw over the course of the project, it was one of those chicken or the egg things. It was like we need the children, but we don't have the staff. We have the staff, but we don't have the children. So it was one of those. So in our project, we looked at putting the investments in the teacher so that they were able, which retained them. Then that would open the door for more children to come in so they can fill the slots. Because of course you have to have, there's a certain number of children that, according to a daycare license, that you can have in there with a staff person. If you don't have a highly qualified staff person, you certainly do not have children. And if you have children without that qualified, so it's really, you had slots. So it was really a combination of both of those. Now, I'm not 100% sure about how many centers opened up. I think some of my co-workers will have that information better than I. However, to answer your question as far as slots, access continues to be an issue. And I think if we were able to invest more in our teaching staff and our educators so that we could meet those ratios, I think we would see them filling up a little bit faster. But you have to, even if we have the educators, there has to be funding, a source of funding to pay them. So I think it's really kind of cyclical in that way. And then, of course, just the climate in which we live and some of our families just being able to afford high quality care is another issue that we continue to see.
Let me ask this question related to Commissioner Wilson's. I would see the pre-K classrooms, whether they're kind of nonprofit, publicly funded, or private, is a subset of childcare. And I mean, our community talks about childcare, access to childcare generally. This is just a subset because this is 4-year pre-K, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's typically a 5-hour program, 6-hour program a day versus kind of 3 hours. Is that kind of true? A lot of childcare is 3 hours.
What we prefer is about 6.5 hours.
For the pre-K part?
Correct.
But for, say, a childcare program, average hours, what are you talking about?
That can vary anywhere from 8 and in some cases 12 hours. And a lot of that's because of the infant toddler care, which is actually what the biggest need in our community is, that infant toddler care. So that's those hours are different. But in pre-K, an ideal situation is 6.5 hours.
But it is a subset of the total childcare arena.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so now to the fun part. So taking a look at the results from year 1 and year 2. As you can see, even as we look at both years, there was significant growth for all of our students from the beginning of the year through the end of the year, and our 3 core areas, which is literacy, math, and social-emotional, which are foundational as children are transitioning to kindergarten. In year 1, we saw great results, but in year 2, we saw even stronger results, which was really exciting to see. And I take that back to, again, the support, the coaching, the TNTA, the professional development. All of those things play a role in ensuring that our children are growing. While you see, and I guess you could take a few minutes to take a look at that. However, you'll see that our children did grow by 27% in year 1 versus 29% in year 2. 29%, small growth, but growth nonetheless. And of course, this goes back to the teacher. So you saw a teacher in year 2 that had children who grew at 27%. Same teacher with literacy grew by 29%, and math 45% in year 1. And you saw that growth just jump up as to 64% in math in year 2. 40% in year 1 to 56% in year 2. So in comparing our teaching strategies, goals, and results, which is an assessment tool that measures the instruction and the growth of our children. So students in the program exceeded our NC Pre-K statewide averages, as I spoke of earlier, in 4 out of 6 categories. Those categories were math, cognitive, social-emotional development, and physical development. And the last 2 categories that I spoke to earlier was literacy and language. While they weren't over the max, we didn't exceed, you see how close they were. Just a 1-point difference in language and just a few point difference in literacy. So, but I think to this one, I just say with those comprehensive support and programming in this cohort really made it our children that are in our private provider settings very much competitive to the national. To our state NC Pre-K readiness.
Again, use of what are our terms of art for the particular field here. Define social, emotional, and cognitive in this context, please. You know, math and literacy sort of speak for themselves, but those...
They can. So when we think about the social-emotional, starting with social-emotional, children have an agency of themselves and supporting their mental wellness in that relationship in the classroom. What we want them to do, want them to be able to do when they leave us and move on to kindergarten is have a grasp of how to articulate themselves, when to articulate themselves, how to measure themselves, how to monitor their own behavior, and have those resources there. So we saw an increase in the way that the children and staff work together to manage behavior in classrooms. So it's that social-emotional control and managing themselves and how to do that in an appropriate way.
All right, thank you. What about cognitive?
So cognitive, it was simply that growth in the classroom. So as much of what you saw, and a lot of going back to the instructional support, and teaching children how to, and that was really more of a teacher skill that trickled down to our little ones, and that was how to encourage them to problem solve and seeing that growth in those areas, teaching them to expand their learning so that they could grow, to grow what they're learning in the classroom, and open-ended questions that encourage them, the children, to think on their own and come up with solutions, or even to as they're working through tasks. So that's what we're talking about, cognitive.
All right, thank you.
I was going to give you an example. I have a 5-year-old grandbaby, and she's learning how to count as well. So I'll ask her to show me what 5 looks like with 2 hands. And even though she's still counting, she can't say 2 or 3, but she'll do 1, 2, and that's considered the social, emotional development, or is that cognitive?
I'd say it's cognitive.
That's cognitive, definitely cognitive.
I'm learning.
And you know, and why this is so important is because I think it's natural for us as parents, caregivers, and even teachers and educators to do 4. But it's just so important for us to teach our children to inquire and to grow their own knowledge. And I think that's absolutely a struggle, I think, just as caregivers. So I think that's why we continue to see those scores a little bit lower in those instructional supports. And then in cognitive, even though while we're growing in those areas, which we absolutely want to see, that's an area that we need to continue as educators, parents, and teachers, and
I think you're
the community.
teaching us a little bit more, and I'll just use one other example. I'm trying to get to the social-emotional development example. So sometimes she'll tell us to go down the stairs, but she'll remind us that the stairs are dangerous. So is that somewhat of an emotional development?
Well, it could be. I don't think that any of these work in a silo. They kind of work together.
Or maybe is it
I
that
think
she's telling us how she feels about something?
about you, she doesn't want you to fall.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
See,
All right.
absolutely, but I love that she's able to articulate
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
So I think it does, they all kind of work together.
Okay, fair enough. This is helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I do have a question about the literacy piece. I think that statewide, nationwide literacy continues to be a challenge. And it looked like out of the 6 measurements, that was the one that sort of eluded us in, at least meeting the state benchmark. So did you all have any takeaways around why literacy wasn't as progressive as the other components?
I think, a couple of them. I think it was twofold. I think it's instruction and, just increased professional development around literacy, what that looks like in the classroom and all the opportunities to grow that. And we also saw that even in our parent engagement, because we recognize that, in order for children to grow, there has to be that relationship between the parent and the educators. So it's the supporting our parents in understanding what literacy is, what it looks like, and how it shows up every day. So they too can support that. But also it's making sure that our provider settings have a research-based curriculum, which many of them did not have as we went into the project. Now, we know that our Head Start centers have it. They have the resources to purchase those. Of course, our school system, they do. But licensing doesn't necessarily require that you have a research-based curriculum. They would like for you to have it, and it does increase your star rating. However, you can create something of your own. But we were able, through the project, we were able to provide those curriculums that had a lot of strategies and resources that were tapped into it, in addition to the professional development and the coaching. But then the materials. So in addition to having that research-based curriculum, you also have to have the materials and resources I guess I'm looking for the word, I don't want to say, to support it. And that's not the word I'm looking for. Excuse me, I'm going through the minnow and the pause. So it just goes, and that was my pause. But it's in there, but the materials and the resources together really do support to dig a little bit deeper for the children and connect it, to embed it into the learning, I guess is what I'm saying. So I guess we're talking about, it really is a holistic issue. It's not just materials, it's not just parents, it's not just instructors, it really is a whole piece, it's comprehensive, that will move that needle when we think about literacy and language in the classroom, or for young children in general.
My last question, and you may or may not know this, as it relates to, in Forsyth County, the number of pre-K, whether it's public or private, and how many of those pre-K have what I would say research-based programming in for literacy. Mm-hmm. Do you all have a number of what?
Well, a couple slides back, I did have a slide that showed, at least within our project, the number of classrooms that we serve versus how many were yet to be served. And I think that's a good number. But I don't know that exact number, but I can say that I know for sure, I know for sure that our school system has a research-based curriculum, and we know that our Head Start centers have a research-based curriculum, and it does differ.
Pre-K slots as well.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Finney. So you're correct, and we have NC pre-K slots within our school system, also in our Head Start classroom, and in some of our private provider settings. But it's those private provider classrooms that have the research-based curriculum. Not all of the classrooms have that research-based curriculum, which is where in a Head Start classroom, in a center or a program, everybody has one. Even if it's infants, toddlers, and twos, or if it's creative curriculum, everyone has a research-based curriculum that supports those children's learning from birth through their exit to kindergarten, which we don't see that in our private provider setting.
Would it be fair to say, and this gets at Commissioner Woodbury's point, that the TS Gold is an assessment tool? And it is kind of the, no pun intended, sort of the gold standard of assessing progress for a 4-year-old. I mean, 4-year-olds, you don't test like you do everybody else. So, but it's kind of the gold standard. And would it be fair to say that for example, some of the private classrooms in this study probably had not been using the TS Gold? Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement. There was a lot of
So
professional development that was done in year one to support them in the use of the tool.
Yeah, so if you've got classrooms that have never used this assessment, teachers have not been used, really with a group and they were purposely put into this study because of one of the members on our task force had the belief that probably because of both resources and training and other things and not reporting, that the private classrooms may not have that. And that was part of the issue of when kids get to kindergarten where there were some gaps. So it was a way of building up, basically equalizing with everyone. That's why private providers that had not been included were included. And they were happy to be included because they got some additional salary dollars to equalize salary dollars, which is coming up the exact amount. So that is probably not a surprising difference. In fact, this is one thing I was a little disappointed in the evaluation, that you didn't compare the private providers as a group and the nonprofit providers, because I think there would have been some differences, and maybe there's a lot of reasons you don't want to, but there were whatever the number of classrooms, I don't remember, but it was a fair number of classrooms in the private one that wouldn't have been really singling them out. But I just suspect because of some of those differences with this assessment tool that had not been used, there would have been some pretty stark differences between more the public-private, and I would have liked to have seen that difference between public and private, but maybe I can understand why that was not done. Because they're small numbers and things, you're not trying to identify, you don't want data to become identifiable with a particular place. So I can understand that, but probably it's good to be at the average considering the sample of the classrooms that we were using.
I agree. I think
I hadn't thought about that till you mentioned all that other stuff. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So, well, now we're here. We're talking a little bit about our salary parity that can close that compensation gap. And to the conversation that we were having earlier when we talked about where our private provider settings started. So on average, we saw salaries at $28,000 to $32,000 a year versus our Winston-Salem Forsyth County school settings where they earn $42,000 on average. With the support of this particular project, we were able to, many of our project participants were able to get in that 40 range. Now, we couldn't get them all the way exactly to parity, but it really did close that gap a significant amount. And the teachers you really saw, and as you saw, that really did help to retain them over the course of the 2 years, as there were a few that did leave in year one. Many of them, because of course we do an exit interview and when we can, to ask, what was their reason for leaving. None of them shared that there was any issue with the project itself. It was moving forward for a sustainable income, moving to support their families. Those who did stay with the project, they were very excited about the retention over the last the retention bonuses, as well as the equity, the salary parity, and as well as tuition supports that were provided through the project, which did, of course, have a more lifelong sustainable impact for them, and where we had about 10 teachers and 4 of them to continue on beyond the project for the educational pursuits. Okay. I'll pass the torch to Dr. Finney, where he'll talk about the look ahead. Thank you.
And I promise only to be about 30 minutes. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Looking ahead, one thing we really wanted to focus on was just some of our immediate returns, but also the projected long-term ROI. And one thing that we're really impressed about from the immediate aspect that we talked about was the teacher turnover cost that was avoided. As many of y'all know, particularly those in the business perspective, someone brought this up earlier, it costs a lot more to rehire additional people, and particularly teachers and teacher assistants. So we saw that as an immediate impact in 23-25. And then statistically, from a 20-year projected return, With our data, we can see, and some of y'all may know this already, every $14 to $17 return for every dollar invested. And it increases not just things in children, but also with parents and parental earning. I also want to just do some annual reporting to the county as well as far as kindergarten transition that we're very proud about. This is our first.
Could you repeat that again?
Yes.
What you just said?
The kindergarten transition?
Yes, so are we actually following the students in year 1 and 2?
No,
to
no.
see
Part
how
of the
well they're
project wasn't to
doing in
follow them
kindergarten?
to kindergarten in first and second grade. I'm just referring to the ones, the grade retention rate in the first report in the fall in 2026. This is just regarding those who transition. Meaning we had about 710 that actually went into kindergarten. And that's where they're at right now.
Maybe I'm missing, maybe I
Okay.
dozed off here a little bit, but
Okay.
Do we actually have, are we prepared to follow the group, the 2 cohorts as they move into K-12 instruction?
Yeah, unfortunately, this project didn't provide the support for that. The only ones that could likely do that may be the public schools, but the private child care and the family service and the Head Start program don't have that capacity to do that actual preparation. Unfortunately, we can't track their kindergarten, first and second grade.
I won't take time now. to talk
Okay,
about that.
all right. A good point. But also just want to give you an idea of some comparable sized counties that invest in local revenue. And also just talk about some of their populations. Like some of you may be familiar with Buncombe County, Durham County, Dare County since 2004, 2.8 million, their population of 37,000. Cumberland County. And we appreciate about those counties, just like ours did in the ARPA project, is they all dedicated local funding streams directly supporting increased access that was really more continual funding that they currently do. And some of them done ARPA, but primarily, most of them have actually just put a funding stream within their county budget to support this.
For Cumberland County, I don't see an amount. I see amounts for Buncombe, Durham, and Dare, but is there an amount of local investment?
Yeah, Cumberland County is new. Theirs is ARPA, and I can explain what that was. They have a program that works primarily with families and children that started being funded 2 years ago through the Smart Start program called Family Connects. And that's something very new to theirs. They just started to actually continue to fund.
Okay.
So Cumberland is actually was more the smallest and more the newest revenue. The others have been doing this for some time.
So did I?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding as well. You're saying that Durham puts in their general budget $7.3 million, and that's not part of any of the ARPA
No,
supplement?
none of these are ARPA. The only one that does the ARPA is the Cumberland County had done an ARPA project, but now they're continuing to do that. And that was for a Family Connects program that went through the Smart Start program. And all of them have a different approach. All of them, and some of them, for example, might do slots. A lot of them they invest in their subsidies program because most counties and Smart Starts do subsidies. And most of them also invest in the NC Pre-K program so people can get additional dollars as opposed to getting $600, they make it $800. So it kind of varied amongst the counties. And then some do threes, have already begun a 3-year-old, like Wake County, excuse me. And this example with Mecklenburg actually is a little bit higher than this. Mecklenburg is actually about 24 million, what they do. They have a different approach, but they've been doing this for quite some time. And of course, their population is 1.1 million. And they have a different process where $1 million goes towards NC Pre-K, a portion goes towards the Smart Start to look at the entire system, and then some goes to the Head Start program, and then they also increase slots. In Wake County, what they do, they serve 1,300 slots for our 4-year-olds, but also now what they're doing this year is they're doing 3-year-olds. And that completes our report, and I just want to thank you all for your time and just subject to any questions that you all may have of me or my team.
Questions for Dr. Finney?
Okay.
If I may, just to put this in current budget context, Dr. Finney, I assume that the Smart Start Forsyth County ask in the community grants is related to this program?
Yes, it's similar and also similar to the point, and ours is very small. It's nowhere near the $1 million. It's probably about 1% of what we actually asked for. Ours is more similar to what happened to open up centers. That's where we're finding some of the biggest issue is that we're having difficulty opening up centers because people lack the resources such as things like curriculum and so forth.
Are you aware of, and if, the answer may just be no, but are you aware of any other asks in this year's community grants programs that are associated with the pre-K program?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not that sure. What everybody else applied for. Just our specific amount was directly towards more open centers, specifically, and also working to support kids with disabilities. And so, actually, I might need to get my staff person. You want to talk about our application? You have the specifics.
All right.
Yes. Here, I take that.
Thank you. So yes, as we came out of the ARPA project, we were looking at continuing support for children with disabilities and making sure that our private provider settings had access to a tool that helped them to not only identify, because a lot of times when you don't know, when you're just learning child development and learning how children develop over time and different milestones, every behavior looks like a poor behavior, when really that's just how children develop, that's how children learn, that's how they experience life. But there are times when teachers are not 100% sure, but our teachers in our private provider setting do not have access to a tool to help them to be able to drill down to some specifics as to, should I be referring these children for additional services? Should we adjust our the way that we instruct? So a part of what we were looking to do was to provide our private provider settings with a tool where they would work in relationship with the parent to complete a tool that would help them to learn about the child, what's behavior that is typical versus atypical, and then make that referral to our school system where they will then be able to do a deeper dive into the behaviors that they may see and determine whether that child is eligible for services. What we were seeing is that these children are transitioning off to kindergarten and not having that assessment prior to, which makes it really difficult for that kindergarten classroom where there isn't an additional staff person or those other supports there. So our hope was to make sure that these children not only have a successful and good experience in preschool, that they continue to have that love for learning as they're moving forward, by making sure they had that early intervention on the front end and supports in preschool, so that when they got off to school, even they may have moved past it, because some of them they may need a limited amount of supports, or those services transitioned with them over into kindergarten, making it easier for them to transition and get those continued supports as they move forward, instead of having to wait until the school year began in kindergarten, which makes it a lot more a nicer experience, not only for the students, but also for the parents. You know, there's a lot of learning that they may or may not have. So this tool also supports them. So that's in a nutshell what we were looking to do. And of course, we're providing them with coaching supports, professional development around disabilities and different types of disabilities that may come into their classroom, so that they are able to provide that level of instruction and make sure that they are meeting all the needs of the children in their rooms.
And so the request that you made is pointed toward the private providers that you've been working with or have identified. Is that correct?
Correct, because this Head Start has these services embedded into their program. They have a system for identification. They have MOUs with the school system so that those services are being provided on site in the Head Start. And of course, the school system has their school system services. But our private providers, we learned, do not have the system, and not a lot of times didn't even know how to seek services.
And so the school system's pre-K classes would have these evaluations done in preparation. They're doing that now, is that correct?
The school system preschools, yes, that's built into their systems.
It's built into their system, so
Absolutely.
they're getting this assistance, and the private providers need the assistance.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question about, I think Dr. Finney's portion when you gave us a kind of a snapshot across maybe the state with what's going on in other counties and cities. It looked like over in Durham, there was a city tax revenue resolution that was a part of building funding for pre-K. Did I get that right or wrong? I was looking at,
I'm not sure how it started, because they've been doing this for quite some time. They've probably been doing this for the past 5 to 6 years.
really?
So I'm not sure of the process, if it's an actual tax or if it were actual part of the budget. Leslie, you have any information on that? Oh, it's up there?
Did it-
Okay. Okay. Got it.
So
Sales tax
it
revenue, I'm
was a
sorry.
resolution by
Correct.
the city of Durham.
Correct.
Okay. Have we tried to have any conversation with the city of Winston-Salem?
I have not, I've talked to some individuals, but not as a whole, the entire city regarding that tax.
Yeah, I know that people, taxing our citizens, that's a dirty word until sometimes people tax and get what they, I guess, think is more important than other things. And I just don't know what is more important than trying to increase our public school infrastructure. And public school infrastructure, I think, absolutely depends upon how we get our pre-K children started. So if too many of our students, for example, going into public school education, not zero ready, but negative 5 years ready, that meant that since they came out of the womb, there's no progress for once they get to public school for us to even start. So you're trying to catch up and you just don't. And that's why you have so many of the other residuals that we want to per se complain about. Why aren't our third graders literacy ready, which then propounds to middle school, high school, and then you have school to prison pipeline. And that's the unfortunate part when we have a public school infrastructure for every child that is here in our community. Every child should then, in my opinion, absolutely, more so than not, have access to a good life because they have gone through our public school infrastructure. But we know that because of the challenges faced by the public school system to offer a solid education, I think one being, hey, we can't, as a public school infrastructure, take zero readiness and make it into, 10-year readiness. It's just a number, it's just too far of a gap, is I guess what I'm saying. And I think that as a community, we have to make the hard decision to say, for example, at the county level, there are many opinions about even our community grants. And that is very important in our community, but also it is very important, that's $1.2 or $1.3 million, is very important to figure out what we're gonna do, with pre-K. And I think that we need to, I guess, start looking at what the ask is, at least from where I sit as a county commissioner. What is the ask from your group and others around? What does it take for us to be invested in pre-K and Forsyth County for us to start seeing the residuals, the return on the investment, particularly as it relates holistically to our public school infrastructure, so that we can see higher literacy scores once they get to third grade?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And most of those investments are not just long-term, they're actually short-term, particularly if you're talking about your private child care who may not have the access to the special needs and disabilities. And what we're referring to in our particular project is more the IEP process, which some people may be familiar with. And that's where you have that parent working with that teacher to try to help and evaluate that child. But actually that starts at age 2, what you do is called an IFSP, which you work with actually the parents. And that's what a private child care does not have as well. So that's why our approach to this application was actually looking at that entire subgroup, because what we found in the private child care, that's non-existent. And there's actually a requirement to work with these children by law once they get that IEP, but there's just not enough staffing across the whole county to be able to work with every single parent who has an IEP. And that in turn impacts them going into public school. So that's where these small investments and large investments also help when they come in. Because what happens when they don't have these IFSPs or IEPs, in kindergartens, they're labeled as bad kids. And that's where we're trying to support these kids in this earlier project, particularly the private child care, because most of them are in the rural communities. They might be in Tobaccoville, they might be in Winston-Salem, they might be in Rural Hall. They don't have that access because they might be working from a family child care home in Tobaccoville that we don't have access to, or they have these resources to. And some of them don't even know what an IEP is. And that's what part of this project is saying that we're able to come up with this tool to work with your parent, understand that your kids are okay, to help them transition, to get that fixed so you don't go into kindergarten in first and second grade with an IEP. So some of it's intervention, but also prevention as well. But thank you to your point, it's actually a short-term and a long-term investment that could be immediate.
So is the $514,000 that we spent for the family engagement and support a part of what you're saying as relates to supporting parents so that they are able to
Correct.
have under,
Yeah, and that was a significant, particularly as it related to some of the public school, because that was new for some of them, but also as it related to the private child care, was new to all of them. And that support that also we helped work, we had a male involvement program that worked specifically with the dads too. We found that, and most of you may know that, if you don't have these parents together as well, these kids are not going to be ready for school. And because particularly the Head Start families are some of the most at risk in some of the private child care, they needed an extra boost. So that's where that family engagement came in very well. And Family Services did an outstanding job in working with those parents.
yeah. I guess my last point is I would just like to see what is a final number for at least a year of our budget to support, for instance, any of the strategic approaches that we think could make impact with pre-K in Forsyth County. And so you have the teacher quality. I'm looking at this reference right here, and it looks like there are, numbers over at least 2 years that we could reference for 710 students, if that's, our,
I'll say an ideal situation, and if you look at costs, one is you want to try to increase slots because there still is a need to fund some slots. But also you want to increase quality because it's no good if you have a center who doesn't have an evidence-based tool to help these kids get ready, and research-based tool. So I would say on average, you look at cost, it might be about $1,400 a month what it costs for childcare. An ideal situation for us, and if we can have our wish list, would be anywhere from $5 to $7 million a year. Or some type of tax if you want to look at changing the system, but also adding additional slots, because you can't just add slots if you don't look at the whole system and help those businesses, but also help the public schools who does a program in Family Services. So it has to be, and also family child care homes, because the early childhood community is very complex. It's not just about a center. It's also the largest minority women-owned business in our county as well. It's all owned by 99% women through every community. You'd be quite surprised how many people own these particular businesses. And we have about 24,000 kids that are in that age group that need this particular resource. So it's actually a lot more children than what we actually think and anticipate. And they transition probably about 5,000 to 6,000 each year going to the public schools. But our role in Smart Start is really to deal with that 0 to 4 to make sure all of them have that particular leg up. But the private child care industry seems to be the one that doesn't have all of those different resources, but also they're the ones who are making $11 to $12 an hour as well. So that was just ask.
Oh,
just a
I
thought.
mean, I asked the direct questions, and I heard it's a $5 to $7 million maybe investment from our community to try and at least put us in, the ballpark of getting done what we need to get done with, investing in our public school infrastructure, to see some residuals on that investment, is what I would say. So there's no need to invest $1 million, and that's not helping us to really get to where we're going, which is by third grade, we have a significant versus below average, at least average and above average number of students that's meeting that mark.
Yeah, and it could be done in phases as well, because we're strong supporters of evaluation and measurements to make sure that it works. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within 1 year. It could be a phased approach through slots or through quality to make sure that it's measured and have some oversight on it. But in an ideal situation, that's what would help our particular county.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming, all of you. Appreciate the report today. A lot of good information. All righty, we're ready for our
Mr. Chair, can we skip to emergency services since we have a lot of
Okay,
emergency
good,
services
good
staff?
idea. That's great. We'll go ahead and have Kyle do the emergency services assessment update. We do have a lot of folks here. That would be better use of their time. Yes.
Good afternoon, or good morning, Commissioners. I apologize. Always get confused with that. So did want to come before you. We were last in front of you in November to talk through an update on the emergency services assessment that the board had last year. Before I begin, I did want to acknowledge all of the folks who are here. We have our EMS director, our fire director, and our 911 director here, and as well as some of their leadership team. Also did want to recognize the county's medical director, who I'm not sure the board has met before, Nicholas Petit. And I'm going to give him a little bit of time to speak at the end as well, but certainly have those. And I hope that you're not going to just hear from me today, because these folks are the ones who are really leading those departments and have some helpful context. But I did want to kind of go through where we've come since November. So just to start off with the background, this is information you've seen before, but the county did contract North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting for an emergency services operations assessment last year. They did a SWOT analysis of 911, EMS, and fire. They reviewed incident response data and provided some recommendations to the board. The board received that report last June and had a bi-morning monthly session report in July from the consultant. The takeaways from here were really, we had seen some positive direction from some of the organizational shifts that we made as far as having the three divisions have their own director reporting to the manager's office, strong working relationships between those departments, and then there were some areas of improvement around structural organization, investment in facilities and fleet, and then some modifications to operational strategies. And we're going to go through those in just a second here. Before I start through there, I do want to recognize a couple of folks who are not in this room today. One of the key strategies that was highlighted was really investing in data analysis. And so you're going to see a lot of data here today that's been put together, and it's because the board made the strategic decision to put some data positions in both 911, EMS, and fire, and those individuals have really helped us dive to another level of analyzing our system. I apologize. It looks like there were some formatting issues in the transition here, but I know you do have a report in front of you as well. So looking at some of the recommendations from 911, there were several items that when we came to you in November that we had already made progress on. So establishing the assistant director, looking at where the main primary answering point is. I did want to highlight the last one here, which was evaluate and report on demonstrated performance for 911 staff on fire dispatches and EMS dispatches. So that is something, like I said, with this data position, the data analysis, we've been able to do on a much different level than we were before. Each telecommunicator actually gets a report card on a monthly basis. We're looking at individual performance, we're looking at system performance, and we're really able to analyze areas where we can provide additional training, additional support to strengthen our response. So when we look at what we've been looking at as the key indicator here that we're trying to improve, it really is call processing time for 911. So the moment from the time you get the call to the time something on the first call is dispatched, that's the number that we were trying to improve. So this is a picture of the dashboard that we're using really to track this on a monthly basis, and I'm going to walk you through it real fast because there's a lot of information here. And I just want to apologize from the start here. We were working on the color scheme. It's hard to read, so we'll adjust that in the future. So this is looking at our 911 dispatch who dispatches fire and EMS calls. The top bar graph here is the call processing time, and so this is in minutes. So you see, in March it was 2.77. So that's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And so you can see that is kind of consistent at around 2.5 minutes, a little bit over, some variability in the months, and that's what we're tracking here. The goal is really 106 seconds. And so 1 minute and 46 seconds there. And so we're not there. There's some, we're working to get there, but just want to show you where we were. The second line graph here, the top line is all of the calls that were processed by month, and the line below that is how many were processed within that 106 seconds. So we wanted to show you, of all the calls that we received and processed, how are we doing at meeting that goal? And you can see we're around 75% of the time we are processing those calls in under 106 seconds. So as we dive a little bit deeper, I wanted to show you some of the nuance here. So this is overall all fire and EMS calls. And so if you look here, this is fire calls only, and this is specifically for the City of Winston-Salem fire departments. We have the same chart, the same information for the county fire departments. It actually looks very, very similar. And so you can see here, these numbers are quite a bit better than the overall numbers. You can see it's a little bit over a minute consistently is how long it takes to get that call from the time the call comes in to the first unit dispatched. And that's why in the line graph there, you can see those are very close together, and at the bottom, you're close to 100%. You're not over 95%. And so before I talk about why that is, I'll go to the next slide. So this is only EMS calls, and you can see you're much higher here. So over 3 minutes in February, around 3 minutes consistently. And you've seen a little bit of improvement since March of last year. We've gone from about 3.5 minutes down to 3 minutes consistently. But you can see on the two graphs below that, it's about 60% of the time when we're able to process those within that 106 seconds. So the key difference here really is the complexity of the system. So if you think about it, when you get a fire call, someone says, I got smoke in my house or fire, our system dispatches the closest fire department. The system tells you which fire department is the closest one, and it sends that unit. Or if in the county, it sends whatever unit serves that district. And so that's a pretty quick call. But when you have a medical incident, there's a lot of information that has to be retrieved from that caller before you can send the appropriate resource. So in our system, our ambulances, we have 3 levels of ambulances. We have an ambulance with a paramedic on it. We have an ambulance with an advanced EMT, and we have an ambulance with just EMT, so advanced and basic level. And different types of calls need different resources. And so our call processors are trying to figure out what resources are available, how many trucks are available of each type, and what is the right truck to send to that right call. And so there's just a lot of detail that has to go through, which increases that time. I know our 911 director, Jamie Four, and our medical director have really worked with the staff and worked through our protocols to try to see how we can reduce that. But there was a time, and I know this board's very aware of that, where there were paramedics on every truck, and that's just not the world that we live in anymore. And so you are having to make a lot more decisions about what type of level of service do we need to get to the specific medical call. So I wanted to provide that context here, but this is the type of data that we're really looking into here. So of those recommendations, there are 2 that we identified that were still in progress. I'll touch the second one first. So additional training and support is needed. So we are really working on that. The team has worked hard to update the training manual. They're over halfway there and should have that in the next month or so completed. We are bringing in new teleprocessors, but I'll just mention that that is a place where we have really struggled. And there's a couple reasons why. I think throughout all of emergency services, it's a harder market to attract talent. There are fewer people going into it. But particularly at 911, there are 4 processing centers within Forsyth County alone. Our 911 center dispatches EMS and fire. The sheriff has their dispatch, which we receive those calls and then send them to the sheriff's office, and they're dispatching sheriff. Winston-Salem Police Department is dispatching Winston-Salem PD, and Kernville has theirs own. So we are competing within all 4 of those, even locally, for talent, which makes it a little bit more difficult here. And so we have continued to hire and train, but it is certainly a challenge in getting that. And we are bringing in people who may not have, they get the minimum medical experience education that they need to answer these calls, but may not have been a provider. And so it is a challenging environment, especially when you're trying to manage all 4 of those different centers. I don't know if, I know our 911 director here, I don't know if you want to add any context to any of that.
Morning, everybody. Real quick, just to kind of cover the same things that Kyle's already mentioned. You got 4 comm centers within one region that are competing against each other for staff. There's 124 recognized PSAPs in the state of North Carolina, basically 1 per county, and then there's a few counties like ours that have multiple. There once was a time, as you mentioned, as far as resource allocation, every ambulance in the county had paramedics on it, so there was no delay in determining, do I send a paramedic, do I send a basic, do I send an advanced? Now you're truly trying to connect the right resource with the right call, right? When you're doing that 70,000 times a year, you're going to get it right most of the time, but there's going to be those instances you don't, or the resource you need to send is not available, right? And again, we'll go back in the archives here. 911 used to be a place where people would go when they were tired of running the fire calls on the street. They were tired of riding the ambulance, but they still had a need to serve the community. So they had a lot of field-based experience, right? They knew the questions and the answers and kind of how to progress through the call-taking process. And now we're giving them the basic training that they need to get their APCO EMD credential, which is also recognized at the state of North Carolina level. But we're working closely with EMS training and getting them some exposure to their Con Ed that they have to do to keep their certification up, and some ride-along time so they actually see, right? I think I've mentioned it up here before. Blindfold yourself, sit on your hands, answer a phone, and in 60 seconds try to determine what's going on the other end of that line, get the resources going, and then give them directions on how to potentially save a life. And that's challenging at its best. Thank you.
So we'll move on to the EMS section here. Likewise, with 911, there were a number of recommendations that were made. Here are the ones that we presented to you in November as had been completed. We haven't added any new ones to that, but we'll talk a little bit about some of the progress we've made in a second. Looking at those key progress indicators that we really are looking to impact, really are kind of our units available. So how many units are available during the day, during the night, during different shifts. The unit hour utilization, which is essentially a measure of how long our providers are on a call. So from the time that ambulance gets dispatched to the time it clears, that is a call. And so what percentage of their shift are they actually on a call? And then another critical one is our response times. Apologize for the formatting here. So this is coming from the actual report. There were, when this was done, there were 12 ambulances operating from 6 EMS bases in Forsyth County, covering 412 square miles. From the existing EMS stations, 22% of those emergency incidents occurred within a 4-minute travel time, and 74% occurred within a 9-minute travel time. However, EMS was also taking simultaneous calls 89% of the time. And approximately 21% of the time, all in-county EMS units were exhausted, so there was not an ambulance available at that point. You could look at the workload, and that was that unit hour utilization number. So EMS reported a 0.63 for our unit hour utilization, which is one of those critical indicators. So the goal that the county has is around 0.5. From an industry perspective, a 0.35 is really where you're saying your system is not overburdened or stressed. And so just wanted to put that out there. And then so the other thing that the assessment did was look at our call volume and look at our peak hours. So when are we seeing the most calls? And I think, obviously people are awake between the hours of 8 and 9, 10 in the evening, and so you're seeing a much higher call volume there consistently throughout the week. They also assessed, based off of that call volume, how many units would the county need available during those specific times? And you look through these charts and you can see numbers. There are times where there are 23, 24 simultaneous calls at the same time. What they showed was really during these peak hours, at least 20 ambulances on the road to be able to serve that. Certainly a little bit higher than where we were at the time. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've done since then. So the EMS leadership saw this data and looked at, how can we make an impact here with our existing resources? And so they really started looking at, when we have new hires, we really need to start putting them on the peak hours. And so you can see here your shift, your different shifts. Shift A and B are your 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So those are your day shift, and your 7 p.m. Shift C and Shift D are your 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Back in June of last year, they were pretty even about the number of units available at that time. And then, as we made those strategic decisions, you could see the shift upwards on A and B shift from 12.71 to 15.23 and 18.36, and a shift downwards on C and D shift. I will mention there's an outlier here in September 25 on D shift. That 19 trucks there was a glitch in the performance system, so I want to just let you know that. But the general trend is the system has increased the number of trucks that are on day shift, which has shifted away some of the trucks that are available at night. One thing that they've done that is not really incorporated in this number, and we're still working to incorporate, is they created a specific peak hour shift that's different from either of these shifts. And so that's an 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. shift that kind of aligns with our peak hours to try to get some additional resources on the road during that time. So we've had approximately maybe two trucks over the last couple months additional during those peak hours to help with that burden. So that is really, thinking about the resources that we have and trying to maximize them with the data that we have to show when they're needed. Change overtime to really focus, overtime shows only on the areas where we really need it, so during those peak hours as well. And so you can see really we're averaging between 14 and 19 trucks during those peak hours. Still not quite, what the consultant was saying, where we have, sometimes we'll have 24 simultaneous calls or need for more, but we are improving with the resources we have. This next chart is just looking at instances responses. This is just kind of showing, we do have a steady number of responses per month, about 4,800, 4,500. February of this year was a little bit smaller, and you can see in a second what the implications of that were, but it is a steady system. So this is a chart that shows the unit hour utilization by shift. And so I know that's a lot of busy, so I'll walk through it. In the top left corner, you can see from March of 2025 through February of 2026, what the unit hour utilization for all of our units are across shifts. And you can see clearly that is going down. And so that is certainly a testament to the leadership over there, making some strategic decisions to try to put the resources where they are needed, match it up with peak times, so you have ambulances that are less stressed. February was a very good month at 0.43. It's below that 0.5, which was the first time we got there. Certainly helpful. We did have a lower call volume in February, so we'll have to look and see how that plays out going forward, but moving in the right direction regardless. And the other thing I'll point out here is when we looked at back last year when the consultant came in and looked at this, if you looked into the numbers, the shift differential in their UHUs was dramatic, where our night shifts had a much lower UHU and our day shifts were actually in the 70s. And so you see a convergence of those UHUs, which I think shows that we are trying to put the right amount of trucks on at the right amount of time so that everyone is kind of equally sharing the burden of those calls. So now we're getting into the response time data. So there's two metrics that we're really looking at when we talk about that. So the shoot time is from the time that the ambulance gets the call, gets dispatched, to the time that the truck starts moving forward. So it's really something that we can control by how fast we can get that truck out once we get the call. This is an area where I just want to highlight the team. A lot of work, just like in 911, they work really hard to get every provider in the system a report card on a monthly basis to show what is your shoot time? What is your response time? To give some of that data. And it was highlighted that our shoot times, the goal was 1 minute, and we were over 2 minutes at some point. And so challenged the team, and they have responded. That has come down, and it's some area that we're continuing to improve and try to get those trucks from the time they're dispatched out the door and moving forward faster. The other area here is the response time. So that is the time from the wheels start moving forward to the time the truck gets to the incident. This is a time where, is a really important time. The goal here is 9 minutes. We did look at some comparison data from, different counties do EMS a lot of different ways. Some have hospital-based systems. Some have, joint systems with different boards. We looked at Guilford really as kind of a similar system. And so they're around 11 minutes of response time. And so you can see we are consistently a little over 14 minutes. Went up in January of this year, but I think consistently around 14 minutes. And as you look down those graphs, you can see about 50% of the time we're getting to a call within 9 minutes. So certainly an area where we want to improve, but does provide some real challenges. So this is where I want to talk a little bit about the current base and deployment method. And this is something that was highlighted as a board strategic area initiative. It's something that was highlighted in this assessment. So currently, the county has 3 what we call EMS bases that have multiple ambulances that deploy from those sites, as well as 5 additional areas where we could deploy an ambulance from. And so Station 8, which is downtown across 52, is our main base. 6 ambulances run out there regularly, and we can increase the more trucks we have on the road, the more we can send out there. I'll talk a little bit about how that works. So Station 8 has 6. Amp Drive, which is in Clemens, has 2. And Triangle, which is in Southeast Winston, has 2 trucks. From there, we have 1 that is stationed at the Kernersville Fire Station and 1 that is in the Rural Hall Fire Station. And so those are your basic level trucks. When we get to 13 trucks, we move 1 to the Forsyth Tech Automotive Campus. So that they have a room there and then an external detached bay that we can put an ambulance in and deploy from there. And then when we get to 14 trucks, we put 1 in Old Richmond in the northwest part of the county. And then when we get to 15 trucks, we'll put 1 out in the Piney Grove in the eastern portion of the county. From there, any additional ambulances are deployed from Station 8. And we'll get into why this matters in just a second as we look through some of the maps and the times. But that is our current model for deployment of ambulances. And so this is a map that shows each of those, well, it shows the stations up to 13 trucks, I believe, the one at Patterson. It doesn't have the Piney Grove and the Old Richmond. And so you can see each of these dots is where a deployment site is or a base is, and how many, these are actual, the purple dots are incidents that occurred in 2025, medical calls that came in, and how many of those were within 9 minutes of a deployment site to try to meet that goal. And so that means if there was an ambulance in that station, they'd be able to theoretically get there within 9 minutes. And so you can see there's a lot of areas where there are dots that are not covered with those. Certainly, that's why when we can get to Old Richmond and Piney Grove, the northwest and northeast have a lot more coverage. So I know Jim Wilson, who is in Map Forsyth, who does a lot of this work, is here, and I don't think he said this was ready for prime time, but I wanted to show it because I think it's a really great tool that we're going to have once completed. So this is a graph that shows all of those incidents as well, and which ambulance responded to it. So where was the base location of that ambulance, and where did it respond? And so at the top, you can see by color code what station that ambulance would have come out of or was assigned to. I will mention that there are a couple on here that we do not currently have trucks on that we previously had. So Mount Tabor and Walkertown, we don't actually have trucks there, so you wouldn't see any of those colors there, but they were there. So what I would say comes away from this when you look at it, really, you can see in the southwest around Clemens, there's a lot of, I'm looking for what color Clemens is on here, Amp Drive. So there's a lot of light blue, but there's actually a lot of that Station 8 too. And you can see that in the northwest, the northeast, even in the Rural Hall area. What this illustrates, I think, is when we have those we have those stations that are outposts, but oftentimes those trucks are not actually there. So if they take a call, they are bringing them into the city to one of the hospitals, and there is not coverage there. And so the next closest available resource has to be sent, and oftentimes that is from Station 8, which leads to some gaps in coverage, quite frankly, in some of those outbound areas.
What's the address of the Triangle location?
What's that?
The address of the Triangle.
You have the actual address of Triangle? It's on Kernersville Road. Triangle Fire Station, yeah. I can see the green dot. We can get you the actual address, I don't know, sir. But if you see on this map, it's that one east of Center and a little southeast of Center. So the other thing that the Map Forsyth has been able to do is really start looking at our response times by zip code, which can show a little bit more of that story. So we showed kind of the overall response times But if you start looking at them by zip codes, you can see the farther you get away from the center of the city of Winston, the response time starts to increase. So at the bottom, at 9 minutes and 43 seconds, you see kind of 27101, which is downtown East Winston. You're getting your fastest response. There is East Forsyth only had 4 responses, so that was 11 minutes and 57 seconds. 4 responses is not a huge sample size there. That truck is probably coming from Kernersville. But then you start to see growth there and to the point where, you look at the northeast and the northwest of the county, you start to see, 20-minute response times. And this is the 90th percentile on that. So, it goes to show that the farther away from Station 8, where we have the majority of our trucks, the more we start to have a problem with that response time. Just for kind of effect, I tried to split this up into regions here. And so you can see King at the top. So that's, there's only a small portion of King that's in Forsyth County or 27021, but that's in the far northwest of the county. But if you look at the next grouping, that's really the kind of the northeast of the county. So Walkertown, Blues Creek area, Mineral Springs, Salem Chapel. You start to see that 90th percentiles and the 16 minutes to 20 minutes, 21 minutes range. If you look in the northwest, so the Pofftown area, Northwest Winston, Louisville, in the far northwest, you're also, 14 to 20 minutes. Southeast portions of the Hornytown area, 16 minutes. And then, Rural Hall, Kernersville, and Clemens are all areas where we do have a truck generally, 1 to 2 trucks. And so those are a little bit better, but you still see those are around 14 minutes or higher. And once again, I think the data is showing that once the trucks kind of get pulled in, oftentimes they'll get dispatched before they even get back to that base. So they'll go to the hospital, they'll drop off a patient, another call will come in during peak hours, and they'll be dispatched from there. And so you're not having those assets in those locations. Yes, ma'am?
These response times out in the county are not very good.
Yes, ma'am.
What do we need to focus on?
Yeah, well, I was trying to build, I'll get to that in just a second here. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So really, I think one of the key critical things here is we talked about, we put 1 ambulance out in Piney Grove or Old Richmond or Rural Hall when we have it. But once that ambulance gets called into the city, oftentimes, and we're going to, I have a slide on what data we're starting to track. We're going to start tracking the times that those ambulances, that station that we have a unit in is empty because sometimes those units get pulled out and don't get back there. Really starting to look at a different model of deployment. So having an EMS base and other parts with 4 or 5 ambulances that can backfill those stations, that has access to get out and in. But right now what happens is when those one-off trucks get pulled into the city, the next closest available is usually Station 8. So they're coming down up 52 or out from the center of the city, which is really leading that. So having more outbound bases where we can actually deploy and backfill those other stations from. I'm just going to say this because I know there's the fire stations on here that I hadn't talked to the fire chiefs on. This is not the plan. This was just illustrating using existing resources. If you got up to 13 deployment sites, there is a lot more coverage for the county. This is an area where you could get to a lot more areas within 9 minutes. And so, but this does go up to, I believe, 13 sites. And some of these are existing fire stations or existing areas. I know we've had some early discussions. Winston 13, which is southwest of downtown, is something that we've talked to the city about putting the ambulance there. But once again, when we get these one ambulances into stations, if that gets pulled out, that area, you get into the same issue. And so trying to figure out how do you backfill those. So really, EMS recommendations, I think the first 3 here that were still in progress are the 3 that really need policy. This is where I think the policy decisions from the board come in. So increasing the number of paramedic ambulances, especially during peak demand times. Our staff has done a really good job of trying to maximize the resources we have right now to put them on the road at the times that they are needed. But we are still struggling. There are 26 vacancies, which is lower. Last year we had 31, 36 before. We're bringing people in, some people are leaving. It is a very challenging market for across the board. I know our neighbor to the north just changed their schedule. They're doing 24 hours on, 72 off, which is a very attractive schedule. They run a lot fewer calls, and so it is a competitive market. We do a very good job of bringing in people and training them, getting them upskilled to the next level, and I think that's something we're going to have to continue to focus on. I know the department is really working on a plan for that. But getting more providers in the door, and then the other piece of that is really having enough ambulances to be able to do that. So right now, I know we heard this on Monday, there are 30 ambulances in the fleet. At any given day, just talking to the department, between 3 to 10 of those could be down or at a special event. So if you have a large event that requires an ambulance to be there, that will tie one up. But we also have, transmissions go out, preventative maintenance, a lot of issues. And so we looked at Guilford County here and, what their coverage is. So they try to have about 23 ambulances owned during their peak hours. They have 52 ambulances in their fleet. But they have, they're at 23 trucks owned during their peak hours, and they're trying to increase that number. Like I said earlier, their response, 90th percentile response time was around 11 minutes. They also have, they have 13 bases and deployment sites. They operate 12 currently, but they're doing a model that has a lot more deployment sites than what we're doing right now. The next two areas are really around making modifications and improvements to the facilities and then reevaluating the EMS-based locations. And I think, that was what we were trying to show in this data is really, from even where we're deploying right now with our resources, 9-minute travel times are not even possible in some areas. And so really for the board, thinking through, where, and staff has already done some preliminary work on this. I think, in the Northwest and the Northeast where you see those very elongated response times, even in Clemens, where right now we have 2 trucks, but there's a high call volume and those get pulled into the city a lot when they're taking people to the hospital. Having some outbound EMS bases where we can, have 4 or 5 ambulances to deploy. Those can still come into the city, but they can also, if the rural haul truck gets pulled in, you can send an ambulance there to backfill there. So certainly, I think that is one of the pressing issues to try to improve this response time. Yes, sir.
What has been the contributing factor to our reduction of vacancies? And when you gave us those numbers a moment ago, were you talking about paramedic?
It is across, actually I have them printed out on my desk. It is not just paramedics. It is paramedics, EMTs, and advanced EMTs.
Was it compensation? Was it our in-house training program?
I will let Chief Davis and his team come up and speak to that a little bit.
Good morning. I think the increase in our staffing is a combination of, working towards being a, player-led team, reaching out to the staff, seeing what their wants and needs are, and then also having the ability to work with these providers and send them to school. The vacancies may be paramedic vacancies, but we will hire you as an EMT, and then we will send you to advanced EMT school, and then we will send you to paramedic school. So that's enticing. We've also done a little bit more recruiting, going out to the community colleges and trying to market our system there. And then the other thing that we did was increase the number of students that we allowed to perform ride time at our agency. So that also helped us with recruiting. So we may have only initially had 4 or 5 students that were employees in that program, but there were 4 or 5 other students in the program, and they did their ride time here. They enjoyed it. So then we ended up hiring them on as EMTs or AEMTs, depending on what school they were in, and then working with them to get their paramedic.
Are there any specific steps that could be bolstered that you'd need more resources for, other than just, you're doing a good job, keep it up? Seriously.
Yeah, one of the things that would be very beneficial is if we could do all of it in-house. So right now we have the ability, we can do continuing education. So if you already have a credential, we can recertify you with in-house education. And we can also teach EMTs. But as far as the advanced EMTs and the paramedics, we don't have the training or the infrastructure or the instructors in-house to teach those. So we have to depend on the community college to do that. So we are at the mercy of Forsyth Tech or Guilford Tech and the number of students that they are recruiting into their programs. And if we could offer a system where we will teach all of those in-house and we have control over the schedules, how many people we can send, it would be a lot more beneficial to us versus having to work with outside partners.
All right, is any of that incorporated in the departmental asks for the budget this year?
Yes, sir, it is.
So we'll have an opportunity to evaluate.
Yes, sir.
I'll just mention in this, and we'll get to fire in a minute. I mean, a lot of these things are going to be, we said, we got the study last year. We said, we need to address these things, ask for them in the budget. So there are going to be choices for the board. I'll just mention, we've had a lot of conversations over the state of, emergency response workforce and how tight and difficult that is. Our surrounding counties, they run a much lower call volume. You may run 4 to 6 calls in 24 hours, whereas on a 12-hour shift here, you may run 10. I mean, you could get cut out the whole time, and that is a difficult thing. And so the people who are willing to come and live that life are different. And so that does create a challenge. I think we're very well aware of that. I think that's why the department's focused on how do we get someone in here as an EMT and invest in them, have them have some loyalty to the county, help them become a paramedic, retain that, and create a system that allows for that to continuously happen. Because we're just not going to be able, with the number of calls that we run every year, to be able to have 4 calls in a 24-hour period.
But by the way, will Forsyth Tech instructors actually come out and teach in-house and be available? In other words, they're getting their FTEs regardless and almost customize that. I mean, they do that with industry. They customize everything. So I would think if there's a demand, they'd be trying to answer it, even if it meant extra, the scheduling with their instructors, even for additional time, because they're getting the additional FTEs for it.
Yeah, you're correct. We've done that before with some of our previous recruit schools where we hired non-credentialed providers, and then we worked with Forsyth Tech. They were able to get the FTEs. They did the education, and that worked for EMT, but there was a time where Forsyth Tech lost their ability to make advanced EMTs or paramedic with the Office of EMS, and they were put on a remediation plan. So there was probably about a 2-year window where that college wasn't able to make any advanced providers. So, and that's supposed to be your number one pipeline, is your local community college. So we weren't able to use them for that. So then we had to start partnering with Rowan, Guilford Tech, other colleges, Rockingham Community Colleges. So it's just recently, within the last 8 months, that Forsyth Tech was reinstated their paramedic certification so they can begin teaching. So we are working with them as we move through this process as well.
Does Surrey have a program? Because they're pretty close. It's an easy get down from Surrey.
Yep, and we've worked with them as well. 3 or 4 years ago, we only worked with Forsyth Tech. Now I think we work with 6 or 7 different schools that are around here, just because it takes that many schools to make enough paramedics to actually keep the market sustainable right now. So yes, we are working with Surrey as well.
So Commissioner Wisenhunt, just to kind of reiterate with your question, I think our staff has done a really good job with the resources they have to maximize that, and they are still thinking of other creative ways to get resources where they can. But ultimately, we just need to fill those vacancies and some more, because you talk about 26 vacancies, that's about 3 more ambulances across the 4 shifts that you can put on the road. So fill those, invest in the ambulance fleet so that we have the number of ambulances available to actually run those, and then really think about where and how we're deploying our ambulances to make sure that we are getting to these other areas in a time frame that's acceptable. Just to talk a little bit about what else we're looking at here. So we're looking at some different areas. Once again, trying to maximize what we have. So we are looking at scene time. So from the time the ambulance arrives on the scene to the time that it leaves, either transporting or not transporting, and we're tracking it by event types too. So whether that's a stroke or a cardiac arrest or whatever that is, and there are some goals for how fast you get through that. Wall times has been a big thing, so that's from the time the ambulance gets to the hospital to the time it clears and gets back in service. We are looking at that to see if there's any efficiencies that we can have, either through working with the hospitals to get cleared faster, or just working with providers to get on the road faster. And then some key data points that we're working on starting to track, because these other ones, they are already starting to track. So times where we do not have any units available, I know that was in the assessment, but we don't have a clear way right now to really accurately determine that. So when we have calls and we don't have any ambulances available, I can say anecdotally, over the time period we were looking at from July 1, there are hundreds of times where we've had to call in for mutual aid from a surrounding county to come in. So we do, and those are when we don't have a resource available, or perhaps a franchise provider helped out, but they really are restricted from working on those priority 1 calls. The franchises are not allowed to do that. So we also are tracking how many times, like we said, how many times a unit's out of the station. So yeah, we've assigned a truck to Piney Grove, but how long is that truck actually there, or is it really getting out of the hospital and immediately getting deployed to another call? And then kind of an overall stress, system stress indicator that's looking on an hourly basis, units available versus calls coming in, so that we can make some better assessments around that. All right, and so the last one, I only have 2 slides on fire, and I don't want to say that I don't want to say that we're not focused on that. It's just that, as the board knows, we have a fire commission that is actively talking about these things, and certainly there will be more to come from that as well. But there were also recommendations there, so here are the ones that we have already completed. So looking at those, the leave for 24-hour shifts, reassessing the department staffing program with Vienna and the Vienna Fire Department. So we did that internally, looking with our HR team and our legal team to make sure that we were in compliance legally, and the answer was yes. Certainly that is a topic of conversation that came up even this week at the Fire Commission about kind of the strategies around those things. So that is an ongoing conversation, but we did it from the internal standpoint. And then some of these other ones, I'll just reiterate that a lot of these do have requests in this budget cycle. But the one that I highlighted here was keeping all emergency response vehicles in excellent operating condition. The ARF truck at the airport is on order, and it will be in this year. It will actually come in October or November of this year. They told our folks October, November. They said, oh, October, November 2027, that sounds great. And they said, nope, 2026. So we will have that replaced this year, and they're excited about that. So just in summary, we're continuing to work from that assessment to try to address these things. We are in a much better place to make data-informed decisions from the decisions this board made to invest in that data resources. We are focused on those key service delivery metrics, and they are, for the most part, trending positive, although I think we are in some spaces where there will need to be additional resources or policy to really affect those farther. And then so areas to work on additionally, tracking progress and response times, investing in our facilities and vehicles, and having that kind of system vision and policy around how we're deploying and who's deploying where. And so once again, there are several budget requests in the fiscal year 26-27 budget to enhance those. With that, I do, like I said, we do have our medical director here, Dr. Nicholas Petit, who works for Atrium, who has been a partner in making a lot of these decisions and looking at this data. So I did want to give him some time to introduce himself and speak to some of the work that he's done with our departments, and if you have any questions for him, answer as well. And I told him he didn't have to wear a tie, so that's on me. I apologize. It's Kyle's fault.
It's Kyle's.
Excuse me. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Nick Petit. I'm the medical director for Forsyth County Emergency Services. I think Kyle did a fantastic job of presenting an enormous amount of data that took many people many hours to accumulate. But it's been my experience that sometimes lots of numbers and charts end up making us look at the trees instead of the forest, and it kind of obscures the actual message of what we're trying to say. If you get too buried in a slide with a bunch of pretty colors on it and a bunch of numbers, you can just get swimmy-headed about the whole thing and not get the point. So I think that my goal is the same as all of yours, which is to provide for the citizens of the county, regardless if your house has bars on the window or a quarter-mile driveway. It makes no difference. Citizen to citizen, know we have to provide the same care for everybody. We have done quite a bit in EMS and 911 for that matter. We've tried very hard to squeeze every last drop of juice out of this orange. And it would be a shame if we came up here and asked you to solve our problems for us with money. What we've done in the preceding months is tried very hard to solve our problems without any extra money. Unfortunately, I think we're at a point where dollars and cents are what are going to get us across the finish line. We've done significant damage to our terrible UHU. We're making huge improvements there, but as you can see from some of those slides, the thing that prevents you from getting timely care in this county is your zip code. And you can, as one of my colleagues said earlier this morning, as many times as you like, you can rearrange the furniture in your house, but the distance from the front door to the kitchen is still the distance from the front door to the kitchen. So you can buy us a whole bunch of trucks and give us a whole bunch of other people, but until we have places to put those, you're not actually affecting a significant change. Some of the UHO and response time numbers would go down, but not significantly. You may have the truck that gets to leave from Station 8 to go to Blues Creek, or leaves from Rural Hall to go to Blues Creek, but you're still talking 15, 20 minutes to get out there. Doesn't matter if we've got a whole bunch of people sitting on the bench waiting to go, they're still not where they need to be geographically to make an impact on that person's medical condition. So again, I wouldn't stand up here and advocate for spending a bunch of taxpayer money, but at the end of the day, we've done quite a bit without it. And the only way to really make any more significant change is to add resources and new places to put these people. Short of that, I don't really have much else to say. Questions for me?
I appreciate you being here and appreciate you working on this. And I think your summary at the beginning complimented our staff and the amount of work that they have done. And this is one of those data-rich and sometimes you can be analysis poor, but it looks like the analysis has been pretty good here. And we've got a lot of good, I appreciate this level of detail, and it helps provide support for the recommendations that are coming. And I think exactly the right approach has been undertaken. Let's do everything we can with the resources we have to use them smartly, well, and now we need to target and strategically place some more resources here for improvements and not oversell what the improvements are going to be because of your analogy of the distance between the kitchen and the front door stays the same. I got it.
I'm not very smart, so I like analogies.
Thank you.
I have some thoughts and questions, and it's for the whole group. It's not directed at
I love that.
you, and I don't have any criticism either, so y'all can relax for today. Next time you come in, if I think I got some, I'll tell you, and then you can stay at attention, and then if I don't have any, I'll just tell you so you can be at ease. Part of the reason I don't have any criticism for either y'all or hopefully nobody else today is I probably watch CNN News more than anybody in here, more than any one person. And I do it to learn what's going on everywhere and listen to the people that's giving the news and then make my own observations. And I watch what's going on in D.C. a whole lot, and some of the people up there, they're just hostile to one another. That's all it is to it. And so I just try to prepare myself all the time to, if something does come up, it makes me a little bit not at ease, is to not be hostile about it, if possible. Okay, back to the subject at hand. One of the things, do you still have any of the little, I call them emergencies, they're the compact cars. Do you have any of them? I don't see them much anymore.
Yes, we still have the quick response vehicles, is
Yes,
probably what you're
yes.
speaking towards. Yes, we do have them, and when staffing allows, we do put those on the road. But what we've realized with those is you have to have a certain number of transport trucks before those are actually beneficial. Because if you just have a bunch of paramedics on these quick response vehicles, then what we noticed was they were just waiting on scene for 30, 45 minutes for an ambulance to get there. So I kind of challenged our team to decide what that number of ambulances was that we needed. And then once we hit that number of ambulances, I believe it's 12, when we hit 12 ambulances and we start pushing out into the community, then we will also put the quick response vehicles out there as well. And we are looking at that program currently and whether it's a productive program and how it impacts our overall UHU and the care that the citizen gets ultimately.
Well, I don't know when they first started using them, but when they appeared, I thought that was a good thing. I used to see them on the east side, but just at different places, and then I got to where I didn't, and I thought, well, maybe they figured out that I live over that way and they've moved it somewhere else. So that got to worrying me a little bit. But I really do think, I think, but y'all the experts, you know, the thought I had is they are the most, if they're at the right place, but that's like all other things, being at the right place. They can get to wherever the scene is, or sick call, whatever it is, they can get there quicker than most anyone else other than the closest rescue units to the wherever scene is in the area. And I know that the locations is one of the difficulties we have, and the ones that I think is probably the most difficult is in the northeast area, and it's probably a little up in the northwest area, Tobaccoville area, and onto the county line, and northeast area, Blues Creek, Salem Chapel area, and some along the north of the county line. And I see that, well, they keep one at Piney Grove sometimes, as you got it marked here, whenever they can. They can, if one is there, they can get to some of the Blues Creek area reasonably quick, be on the south side. But when you talk about going on past Walkertown, 311 North, and then on down to towards the county line, there is the units you use to go that way, just say 311 North or all the way down to the Blues Creek area toward the lake. I give this thought, and then I'll ask you to question. It would seem to me, I don't know, it's been 2-3 years ago, if not longer, they kept one at Walkertown for a while. That one, as I see it, they can, but I know they gotta be used somewhere else too. They can cover that northeast area, and they can also, when you got calls coming in toward, Winston area and then toward, Kernersville area to Taylor's Crossing area that way. So, if you got a call coming in, say Walkertown area and on 311 North, where would the closest location units, if they are there and not out on call somewhere, where would they come from?
Depending on where it is in Walkertown, that truck is either gonna come from Station 8 here in the city, or it's going to come from our Kernersville station, or it would come from Rural Hall, depending on which ambulance recommends as the closest one, depending on where it's at.
Well, if you ride around immediate to the Walkertown area, that's the one that come from the station here, they get there fairly quick.
Yep.
When you're talking about on down in Deep Blues Creek and way north of Walkertown to the county line down that way, and as some says to me once in a while, I pay, not me, they were referring to themselves, I pay the same taxes everybody else does. And I don't have the answer for that, except we just try to do better somehow. And so, as we've talked about a little, it's come up in the fire study, is inequity. Well, we have some, it's not because we're not trying hard and spending a lot of money. It's inequity, maybe in some everything that we do. I don't know. So that's all of the main things I got now. I just wondered where the little cars was, but somebody did tell me once staffing was a problem with them. You need them.
Yep.
On the EMS unit.
And we know that the north side of the county, that there are gaps there. You know, right now we have an ambulance in Rural Hall, but outside of that, if we don't have enough ambulances, we can't even put one at Patterson, which is, you know, halfway between Station 8 and there. So yes, northwest and northeast there are gaps there. When we do get over that 13 number of trucks, we send one to Old Richmond, and then we send an additional one to Piney Grove to assist with that. The struggle is, and it's kind of in that one diagram, is when I first started here, if a truck was stationed at Rural Hall or was stationed at Walkertown and that truck got a call, we did a signal 20. So we pulled a truck from Station 8, halfway between Station 8 and wherever that ambulance was, and that ambulance, it stood by there until that truck run the call, transported to the hospital, and came back into that district, and then that ambulance would leave and go back to Station 8. That way it could get back in the city if it needed to, but it could also go back there. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have the luxury of staffing to do that. So when that call happens in Walkertown and we pull, the Rural Hall truck happens to go over there, we don't have a truck from the city to send there. So then what we have to do is just wait until the call pops out. And that's why what we've noticed is at certain times of the day, mainly between 9 in the morning and 11 at night, there's no rhyme or reason to where the call is gonna be and the truck that's gonna respond to that call. So a call that happens in Clemens, the truck that's stationed in Kernersville could respond to that call because maybe it's at the hospital when the call comes out, so it's closer to it. And just ultimately, there's just not enough ambulances in the system for the call volume that's coming out. So the closest truck goes. So the 911 director, him and his team are doing a good job trying to manage this complex system. But ultimately, there's just not enough ambulances on the road at certain times to keep those ambulances in their districts currently.
Well, it looks like to me with that gap time or the most call times, managing your system the best you can and adding things into it where you can that you have resources for is that's good. When people don't worry about what we are doing if we don't do something. And anything that the county does, if we don't do something as somebody needs to, then that's when they tell you. I had a neighbor told me one time, he said, I don't know why that you charge me so much taxes. I said, well, it's all these things we do. He said, well, I don't ever use anything. I said, well, right now your kid's out of school. And I said, but we do have got some things ready in the event you do need it. If you need an ambulance, we got one ready if it's not on call. If you need law enforcement, we got some of them that's ready, just waiting to go places. Most of the time they're busy. And unfortunately, a couple of years back, he needed the EMS. We had him waiting for him.
Yeah, that's good.
Everything turned out good.
Good, glad to hear. I appreciate the board listening to this. I think Kyle did a great job with it, so thank you very much.
Thank you
Chief,
all.
before you go,
Yes, sir.
you know, following up on this discussion, we talked about zip codes and resources, and I note that the hat trick goes to zip code 27105, and you can take a dozen of these other zip codes and it outnumbers them. It's a large zip code area, and it's been targeted for need for other resources as well. I'm sure you're aware of that, but you know, that's what I'd be interested in seeing is an improvement in that area, along with a couple of others.
Yeah, so that 27105, that's that North Winston area right around Patterson Avenue. I actually live in 27105. I can assure you I'm not taking advantage of that. But yes, we are working on that. We do know that the 27105, the north side of the city up around the 74 corridor, is just going to continue to grow. So we do know that is a gap, and that's why when we get over that number 12 ambulance, when we get to that number 13, one of the first places it goes is that 27105 zip code area at Patterson.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you all again.
Thank you.
I think some of us have meetings kind of in between our next meeting at 2, and I'm going to suggest that we recess until 2, and then if we have time, we can do the MBWE, because our agenda's a little shorter, and I think we can do it at the very end of our regular meeting if that suits everybody. We're good? We will recess until 2.